Yeah, okay, but
Indians.
Paul is here.
The reason I ask is because they haven't ever funded.
Oh,
So I thought I could say like.
And this was the committee that you actually had an extra.
It was like
Isn't this the committee you had an extra
balance, but I
person?
think he's a steward.
yeah, this was the one we had to ask a couple.
Okay. Joint something, I don't know what
Or
it is.
did they volunteer? They
No
don't.
idea.
Oh.
No,
Teresa stepped back.
Oh, Teresa.
they're like.
I think it was Teresa.
We
We have a
okay.
copies of the agenda. Feels like,
I mean, supervisor may not.
Have the famous cough run.
Ask him, but how's your workload? Like,
and
do you have like 2 hours a day?
Yeah,
For the next month or two, where you feel like that would be
Weeks.
or disrupt? Yeah.
this is
An entire month. But it's all not good.
I've had it for 31 days.
It's a good cough, right?
Right.
It's impressive.
I don't. That's not how I want to be impressed.
I don't. Not how you want to be remembered.
Honestly.
Hi.
How are you guys?
Good, how are you? I was, my community center, when I started over there, I was a smoker out of college and stuff. And I got sick and I wasn't.
Good,
Oh,
good.
it's there, perfect, okay.
I was late. I had a client crisis.
Uh-huh.
It was a meeting with the San Francisco HUD field office.
Wow.
And it was the first time I'd been invited to something like that.
So you wanted to be
And,
there.
right, and it's okay to be late if you're dealing with a client crisis,
Right.
but it's not okay to show up late and smell like cigarettes and be coughing to where no one can. I was so embarrassed. I made the decision right there in the moment, I'm quitting smoking, and I never touched another
It
cigarette.
was a multi-combo. Huh?
It was, and it was my career.
You?
One of my career.
5 years to quit.
The city council member.
And the last time that I quit, it was like,
Oh, yes.
yeah, times were so
There's
different.
always drama
And
there
for some
too.
reason,
Yeah, not so much yet.
they don't.
Not calm now.
30 days.
It's kinda
That's
calm.
That's 30 days. I gave everything.
No, I know.
Worth
I mean, we'll have like an occasional meeting.
I must admit, anytime I've ever gone to it.
It was tired of that.
People attend those.
Hardly any.
No.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
too bad.
Yes.
Because you would really learn
Yes.
That's how school board meetings are. And then like,
Really?
and then there'll be something,
one
like
thing.
cockroaches at the high school and then there'll be like 70 people there. Otherwise there's like nobody.
Cockroaches, that's
It was
enough
a
to
big
draw a big
It
crowd.
was a big thing.
Yeah.
It was a couple of years ago, it was a big deal. But then it's
Yeah.
gone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
We remember that even, and I didn't even have kids in
Yeah, it was,
school.
people got really into it. It was
Mhm.
really a big deal.
Yeah, very angry.
That there were,
Yes.
We learned that we hired an entomologist and I learned a lot about cockroaches. It was just like, it was a outdoor cockroach situation.
Yeah.
So they were, apparently it was outdoor cockroaches. not
Yes,
like
they're
indoor.
dark.
Yeah, and it,
such a thing as outdoor, that don't come into your house
I mean, they do come in accidentally, but it's not really what they're,
after.
no,
They're not the ones that are after like household food and stuff.
no, they're kind of like landscape based.
Yeah, we
learned
learned
that-
to live in water meter boxes.
Yeah.
Oh, how interesting.
But there's also,
You guys remember.
but also like when there's a number of years of drought, because I guess apparently they lay eggs in water pipes and when there's a lot of rain, they get flushed out every year. So it's not like a no big deal.
Yeah.
But there was a couple years of drought,
Of course.
so the population got big
I used to,
and then everyone freaked
when
out.
I lived in San Francisco and there
Had a
was so
sign-in
many-
sheet?
I would never get up at night and turn on the light in the kitchen
Ooh.
because it would be like, they turned around and saw there was only one of me.
Yeah,
I'd be gone.
yeah. Yeah, no,
That's how I always felt. It was like.
yeah, I mean, indoor.
There,
These were-
yeah.
I had to deal with that a lot with the construction
They're
projects too.
huge.
because
And they
all of
did
that-
place the-
That shaking of the ground, like they came out and so they.
We really
And lands everybody
Yeah,
online,
they are, but we did, I haven't paid some exterminator bills.
He had a brown screen.
Just,
because they were like, your construction's creating, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and in a way it was, but like
Mhm.
you said, they're.
not-
They eventually
No.
will be back outside, yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's supposed to be a
Oh, you know, like,
and of insect going on, so we're supposed to support the insects.
Yes.
Yeah, there's like a huge decline in insects overall.
Oh,
Yeah.
so, oh,
So support the insects, yes.
Yes.
You know, they don't bother me. They don't bother me that
Yeah.
much. Cockroaches, no, not nice.
Right.
I learned one thing about cockroaches. They're a natural predator to bed bugs.
Oh,
That's interesting.
that is no.
Wow.
I think that's why we haven't had any issues.
I'd rather.
The entire time.
I'd rather have
We can't get rid of cockroaches, but.
But maybe they're serving, I'd rather have cockroaches than bed bugs.
Oh, any day. Oh my gosh, the bed bug bites are terrible.
And they're so hard to get rid of that, but.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
My brother,
No, I got
I got the apartment in San Jose in college.
I got cockroaches. Everybody.
Range.
Yes.
I had a friend, and my neighbors had,
Yeah.
and like I made my landlord.
Apartment building,
And I moved,
like the.
and first I look up at the resident, my husband.
How the back
Yes.
like.
And that's when we started doing
And I
research.
remember like, it's like.
Well, maybe they were doing us a favor.
Whatever they are, there's many.
As we were like.
Well, it's very. That's what you want to hear about them.
Respect their survival skills there.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
So I do want just everybody to know we are live streaming.
Oh,
It's our cockroach conversation. Further away. No,
all right, I mean, maybe we should.
I'll sit right next to.
Should we get going, Veronica?
We have a quorum.
We do have a quorum.
Did you sign in? Oh, no, I didn't. Can you mind just?
Smile
from the camera. I can prove it.
We do have a quorum?
Yes, we have 6 out of 10.
Great, so who is not here, just so I. But I was a little messed up on this.
Amy Smith is not here. I'm trying to figure out where she might be.
We were expecting Camille. Blythe couldn't come. She declined.
Morning. Reese Martinez is likely sick. He couldn't hang for the point in time count yesterday, so he's out sick. And Camille Leggett might show up late.
Oh, that, sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be able to shut this,
Yeah.
but
all right. Paul, can you hear us? Hi, Paul. Okay, thanks for joining us. All right, I'm gonna get us started. This is the Strategic Planning Committee of the Mendocino County Homeless Services Continuum of Care. It's our first convening in a while. Veronica, did we have any public comment on non-agendized items?
No, I received no advance public.
Okay.
comment this meeting. And the agenda was posted in time for the Brown Act, and it's outside this building.
Okay. So to orient you to the plan for the day, I emailed ahead of time, but if you didn't bring it with you, there's a copy of the most recent strategic plan revision. This is a not condensed, I just took out some of the kind of narrative in the beginning of the strategic plan that was originally approved in 2020, early 2020. The board reviewed it, did a revision in November of 2022 that the Board of Supervisors then approved on May of 2023. But since then, we haven't really revisited it.
So we haven't revisited this one, but I do want the committee to be aware, we did do a regionally coordinated homelessness action plan through the HAP 5 grant application. And so there is an MOU between the COC and the county on what they will agree to achieve.
Okay. So we should remember that document exists as well. If I were to remind the group, because you probably, I don't know how much deep attention you were paying, because Veronica can pay a lot of deep attention. That regional plan was structured in a way with a lot of flexibility for us. We had a very specific way that it had to be designed. So it wasn't, it wasn't as tailored to our community as the one that we worked on independently, because it had like a statewide template that we had to follow with some specific kind of measures and ways that we were supposed to approach it. I found it less immediately useful to our kind of just goal setting work, but I think it's important to remember that, Veronica, because
The whole thing's
having multiple plans is also irritating. So somehow keep that.
California.
So the one you have before you though was revisited by the board and now 2 years ago. And the question that we need to address today, the first question we need to address is let's have a little bit of an open conversation about the existing document and whether we need to decide today whether we're starting all over again or we're continuing to work with the framework that we had and doing what would probably need to be a more substantial update. But are we beginning all over again? Or are we gonna try to work with what we have? I think happily, most of you except Judy, you were, apparently I don't know.
No, I'm just kind of, I guess I kind of like a visitor.
No, I was just, well, I didn't finish that. I think with the exception of Carolyn, the rest of us were part of the process in 2019, I think. So that's good because you have that historical memory. Back then you don't even remember at Sage.
I mean,
It was
memory.
like pre-COVID memory.
Let me remind you a
Yeah.
little bit. We hired some consultants, these two nice ladies from a place called TAC. It was like benignly called the Technical Assistance Center or something, right?
They're a HUD contract.
They were really helpful. They were here in person maybe twice. We looked at a lot of data. We looked at a lot of systems level work. We really looked deeply at the Marbit report.
Yes, that's right.
So we spent a lot of time kind of looking at the information we had and really building a brand new strategic plan. So it was a pretty thorough process. We were really lucky because we finished it right before the pandemic began. So we have finished with those series of meetings. So at that time we had the technical assistants as consultants. We also hired Mari Roden as a facilitator for the whole process. So it was a pretty substantial investment of both time and, I mean, the money was money, but I mean, time and expert help. So I'm really looking for guidance. Are we doing that kind of process again? Or have we evolved enough as a community and as a COC? We don't need to do that again, or do we want something in the middle? And whatever decision we make is obviously going to impact the timeline in which we can get this done.
What would help me decide in terms of that? And I don't know how we could gather that data, and maybe you actually have the data. Is where are the holes that are not being met? Like, I know, like, I always wonder at building.
The gap analysis thing.
How many people are we turning away? And we know that there's work being done to try to get some kind of a shelter in the North County. There's Hospitality House on the coast, but how many people do they turn away? It seems like there's a little bit less visibility, I would say. But that's just my, just from watching or wandering around the streets, but I don't really know, but that would just help for me to know, like, where are the gaps happening?
Yeah,
And
that's a good
there's a
point.
process through HUD that we could look at, a COC gap analysis.
Gap analysis is kind of, the concept you're talking about. I think that's, and before you kind of said, before you got to the gap analysis concept, I think the beginning of your part of your question was what data do we have already? And what it reminded me of as you were saying that is obviously we have the pit count, which is what it is. But California is now requiring us to gather these system performance measures. I think Veronica's brought it maybe several months ago to the COC, but there's another kind of data gathering process that we're part of that I actually think is quite helpful and kind of useful. The six, so there's data being collected in our community that's new since we did the strategic plan before.
So just as a little caveat, system performance measures or SPMs. There are HUD federal system performance measures that have been in existence since the early 2000s, maybe going back further. And then there's the newly implemented California system performance measures that are very similar but slightly different. Any of the state HAP reporting that you see are the California SPM. Any of the HUD stuff that you see, that's the federal version. So they are slightly different.
And we have both of them. I mean, we do, yeah. So I'm thinking about what's different since we last convened. I would say the other thing that's different, so California's gathering data in the same way, I mean, in a new way, but it's similar to the HUD performance. But we've also I mean, our HMIS game is way better than it was. So I have a little bit more confidence in the data that we're seeing from HMIS than we did 5 years ago. People are using it far more, faithfully.
Right.
Than we were back then. So our HMIS data probably has more validity now, and we have enough years of history to get some good information. Our own internal HMIS data. Okay, so Judy, like a concept around the gaps would be important.
Yeah.
Or the what holes, where are we,
Mhm.
where have we not made progress?
Yeah, where have we not made progress? I mean,
Or as much progress as we
and I guess we'll know from maybe pit count that just happened. Has there been a decrease in people living on the street?
I'm really interested in this year's pit count. I think it's gonna be really interesting.
So one thing I noticed, from last year's though, with priests bringing in all
Mhm.
Native Americans, that they became almost like the highest group of
Mhm.
homeless population. But so with that, and see, I think you have to like sort of understand data too. I mean, just because you suddenly see that, okay, so Native Americans are experiencing the highest level of any other ethnicity population. But when I asked him, would they move into, if they suddenly had vouchers, would they move into low income housing? He said, no.
Right.
Because what they want is they want housing out on their lands.
Sort of a tribal solution to the tribal.
Yes, exactly. So the two don't necessarily merge. You know what I mean?
You mean the data that you're seeing that
Yes.
may look like the obvious solution might not actually. be
Exactly.
the right.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that that's that kind of thing of thinking a little bit outside the box.
Right. Yeah. Other thoughts? I'm kind of reflecting on the last round 5 years ago that we went through this process and what might make sense now.
Well, I think looking at the things where we've had the substantial progress and finding out like what supported that maybe, and if those things are still like top issues. And then what has been the stall on the things that are like no progress or minimal progress.
I mean,
Yeah.
we've talked about this before, but I mean, one of the areas where we've had substantial progress in the last 5 years is particularly in the Ukiah Valley, but actually on the coast too, is just new housing.
Yes.
Yeah,
Huge
absolutely.
amount of new housing in the last 5 years.
Mhm.
And
And hopefully
not
continuing.
insubstantial percentage of that specifically for homeless individuals too.
Mhm.
So it's really, so you're thinking what supported the areas where we made progress?
Progress, yes.
Mhm.
So we can look and see if there's a need to
And not
continue to
undo
go
them, right?
after,
You don't
right,
wanna-
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, this works so well, let's
Mhm.
stop.
Mhm.
Yeah, and making sure that we're fostering those systems that supported the progress, but then looking like where we're stalled.
Mhm.
And what are the barriers still?
Okay. Shannon or Halifax or Sage, do you have any?
I just think about, there's some outlying areas work to do, some like not Ukiah, not Willits, right?
Yeah.
And especially around housing development. I know our CHDC has been working hard trying to get some projects going in Willits and it's slow going.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know why?
Mostly securing the funding elements to pay for the project is.
Some of the big problems in Willits, if I may, is because I met with the assistant building person in Willits day before yesterday. And all of the potential empty buildings that we suggested for shelter, he squashed immediately because it's not C2. So the only one place that was C2 is really small.
Which is the shelter overlay zone.
What were they? What zoning were they?
Commercial.
That's allowed for a housing
He's saying
navigation
no, he
center.
said no, he said it's not C2.
We would get to push that.
But wait, if it's not C2, you're saying it wasn't commercial. The places you were looking at were not commercial.
Well, what I understand, and you have to excuse my ignorance, is there was one commercial building that was C2 that would qualify for what he would say would be housing. But it was too small for our goals, you know, so, but we're still kind of holding on to that as a stepping stone. But the other building, which was the Willits Press, and then when there was a printing building, and these are both empty and been empty for a while, which is why we looked at them, and they have great possibilities. And when I suggested this, then he says, no, those are not C2. So apparently there's a C1, which is straight commercial, and a C2, which is open for other things. And he was like adamantly no. Now, when we spoke to him about 6 or 7 months ago, he said, if you find a building that's not C2, let me know, and maybe I can work with you to kind of manipulate or maneuver things to make that happen. But when I went in there just this week, it was, no.
Well,
Are
I
you
think,
looking for a shelter or for multifamily housing?
Well, we're looking for a shelter. I'm a Willits Shelter Action Group. So that's what we're doing, but we're open to whatever we can get to have, you know, someplace for people to stay overnight in the rain, in the snow, you know, that. So it was quite a disappointment when he was, because these two buildings that we're looking at that are huge, you're like, whoa, this would be great. And he just slammed it down. Now, I haven't gotten back to the committee on that yet, but I've talked to a couple of people.
As far as our strategic plan goes, like one of the things that points out is around policy advocacy and education and work that the COC can do around educate, just because they're on the building commission or the building and planning department and it's their job, doesn't necessarily mean they know some of not even the most recent policies in California around.
because like housing element advocacy is really important.
Yeah.
And I think where he's getting that C2 is you have to have, that's, I know, like a jurisdiction has to have a zoned, like as of right, you can have an emergency shelter
Yes.
in this zone.
Yeah.
That means less permitting stuff, right?
But the policy goes even deeper.
You can still be in a C1, but it's gonna be, you know.
I mean,
a
you
lot
can pretty much
harder.
put a shelter anywhere right now.
That's what I thought.
There's no permit required or anything, so
Right.
he probably doesn't have the most current information.
Right.
And he may be discouraging you because he just doesn't want to.
Right.
That's what I got from
That's
another source
policy.
that says that currently the city council is not open right now.
I mean, yeah,
We were about 6 or 7 months ago, we were told that they were looking at changing zones, which we were anticipating some of these places would be open. If they've been vacant for 6 months, a year and a half, what would be the,
Well, it sounds like, yeah, I mean, there's two questions, right? It's like, is it actually allowed? And then also like, do you want to be in an adversarial position with your city if there's a mutually agreeable place, right? Like, it would be better if that was the question you're having, like, where do we all feel good about?
well, he did point out.
But he's got to give you some options, not no zero, not zero.
I did point out a section of the city that was C2, which is on the south side of Willits, which there are no buildings that we were able to find. And he did also say what would be really best for you is to get some land and build. So,
oh, sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
like their Kaya, building bridges, from what I understand, they built their own from the ground.
Kind of.
Well, all right, but
Sorry.
I'm going from what I,
That's right there, yeah.
so.
So it sounds like, Sage, you're pulling in the concept that Carolyn is hitting up against in reality is the kind of policy advocacy education concept, which interestingly is the area we made the least progress on since we had a whole section in our strategic plan around improving community and policymaker engagement around this and developing a community understanding about the problem. And, you know, we did not
I mean,
spend a lot of time.
it is an area that causes it,
Yeah,
Yeah,
not to sugarcoat it, we have a really good relationship with the city of Ukiah. We still run up against it.
oh, yeah.
About, like, no, really, like.
But I
use
think
by right at this
even
point.
beyond the use by right conversation, which is an important conversation, that we still haven't engaged policymakers in a lot of different issues, like as well as we should. And honestly, they're kind of asking for that kind of engagement and we haven't.
I mean, but
Yeah.
what, you know, like what you're saying, Sage, like you have a good relationship with the, you know, with the.
And I'm not just saying that because Shannon's.
No, I realize that. It did seem like you were like buttering her up.
I can take
Yeah, yeah, okay. But I also had just heard that because of new elections and everything like that, and other people stepping down, that the Willits City Council had gone definitely a little bit more conservative. So are they is a city council that is that even though you present them with policies and try to be as open and kind as possible, can they just successfully block it just based on, we don't agree with that?
No,
They can't.
they're just counting on small organizations not having the wherewithal to sue.
The more recent regulations are state, we can't supersede state.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So if it came down to needing to do a push, but with, I don't know, with education, I mean, it just seems like we are, you know, we all know we're in this kind of raw area where it seems like people get very reactive about things and they have their own picture of what, you know, a homeless
I
shelter
think
might be.
I think we're in a time where the public is both reactive and out of patience, sort of frustrated with the pace of progress. However, I mean, I think there has been a tremendous amount of progress. And when you keep, I think we're gonna find, I mean, I should not speak too soon, but our very experienced teams yesterday, and Paul didn't specifically respond to this yesterday, but at the pick out yesterday, we had some very good guides. The guide situation was really strong. And people were really struggling to find people out on the streets despite really strong searching efforts. So I think we're gonna see, and it's not a bad thing. It was very cold, I know, but these guides knew what they were doing. You know, it's cold every year. So I'm curious to see what those results are gonna be, because I do think that our progress is gonna show up in data points. It is. I already see it showing up in data points. So I can't remember what my point was there. Oh, the frustration of the public might not be matching the pace of progress. I think the pace of progress is faster than the public realizes.
I haven't seen that. Has there been I mean, there was a while there it seemed like there was a large amount of kind of outrage being you know, in terms of the homeless population and the visibility and what was going on and everything like that.
In Ukiah, that is true.
Yeah,
It's expanding in the coast, but they're having trouble getting traction in inland north.
Do you mean outreach to homeless individuals or outreach to the community to communicate about the homeless situation?
I mean that the general public was.
The public awareness.
The general public, there seemed to be a lot more noise about complaining about the homelessness and the visibility of homelessness.
And
that seems like that's toned down here.
Maybe I feel like it might rise up.
Not in Willits?
I don't know.
No, that's why we're working so hard to try and get a shelter.
It's off the hook on Willits.
Oh, interesting.
In Willits, people are
Frustrated because it's visible.
frustrated with visible homelessness.
Yes.
In Ukiah, it feels slightly, we're in a quieter moment, I think.
Second.
It's a
Quieter
second.
Right, I mean, I don't know,
It's bouncing up again.
Very short-lived lull.
Very short.
There's a new, Instagram page where they're
in Willits,
in Ukiah.
Oh, yeah,
but that's been around for a little while.
Is that the same?
I think the point that was like, we don't have a strong structure to respond to the public's perception. We don't have a good publicity, marketing, like PR. We have no PR at all.
This
Like
is really
nobody is
challenging.
empowered. to be
Yeah,
PR person.
I've been dealing with kind of a similar issue for years, trying to figure out how to head off prospective developers and business owners from making expensive land purchases or signing leases when the thing they want to do is not allowed in that site. Like, how do we get to that first before they make a decision?
Like, what, are they buying land for housing?
Yeah, just anything. It does, anything. But the question is really, how do we get that information effectively to them? How would you know where to get the answer to that question? You went to who you thought was the authority and you got an answer, and why wouldn't you believe that? But where is an alternative resource for that information?
Well,
And I don't know how to let people know this is the place where you can, I don't know.
Right.
It's challenging.
So I know when the city of Willits was updating its housing element most recently, they had a specific email address to communicate with. I asked specific questions of it, never got a response. I did get a thank you for submitting my comments. So, I don't know. And I haven't seen anything advertised on their website. Now, what they share with the public or any signs or anything,
You're like a COC ally at each jurisdiction, like a single point of contact, basically. I do that for a lot of stuff at the city. Like, I don't know the answer to everything, but I know does, and I can, connect you,
You know,
but like.
I like that idea in some ways, 'cause I think about what we struggled with. Yes, it was so hard. The narrative that the COC ignored the Marbit report, I just could not.
No matter how many boards you went in front of.
And when I was at I almost snapped at a supervisor who kind of said that, and I was like. I had this venue where I could be like, oh my God, I have been trying to correct this misinformation for 5 years, pretty much unsuccessfully. So it's the same question, like you can't, like. If there's a public narrative about something,
Yeah.
we're not very efficient at changing it. Like we can't figure out how to do that well.
I don't know, we stop reinforcing the use of
Keep going.
Stop saying
the name
Oh,
that didn't work.
and let it die.
No, we have been unsuccessful in that.
So I think we need to reiterate what you said, that we've integrated 20 of 22 Marbit.
I say that in any venue I can, and it's still like, is this narrative, but we have to keep saying it.
I think that one of the, sorry.
Yeah.
I think that one of the challenges that I see is that we've developed a lot of housing. We've gotten people into housing. We have housing navigation services that are really, not as robust as they could be, and we can grow, but like
And they're not local money.
it's getting traction. That's like through Medi-Cal dollars, like we're
New
getting
funding sources.
traction. But despite that, there's still visible homelessness. And so it really doesn't matter the level of like, look at all the things we've done, because there's still visible homelessness.
That guy, yeah.
And so that's evidence that we failed
To the public,
to the public,
some members of the public.
because we haven't solved their problems, which is that
There's a guy right there.
yeah.
they have to see.
Yes.
So it's almost this like,
Cycle, or not, yeah.
instead of saying you're wrong, saying, here's what we have.
So do you think that there are a certain small portion of people who just do not want housing?
No,
You don't?
I think that is
You think everybody,
continued
okay, you
stigma.
think everybody.
they don't want the
everybody-
housing that we're trying to force them into because it doesn't fit where they want to live. It's not in their community. It has all sorts of stipulations. They tried that and it wasn't successful. They have too high of a level of disability and need. Like, it may not be the right kind of housing for their needs. I absolutely think that the number of
Everybody
people
wants
who don't want housing is stigma that it's not true. It's a myth.
It would be very helpful, especially with the pit count. Sorry, I wasn't able to help with the pit count yesterday. I had 2 emergency meetings back to back. But with the pit count, it would be very helpful, like when we're doing street outreach or even an organization that I was contracted with, like Home First. And they're like the big schmuck organization that helps with negating a lot of issues with unhoused populations throughout the Bay Area. They do outreach every quarter, and they don't just consider the pit count. They get a team of people, and of course, this is an organization in the Bay Area, so they have tons more people than we do, right? But they make the attempt to outreach and ask them, the unhoused individuals, like, would you like housing? Do you not want to be housed? What kind of housing do you need? Is it for disability? Is it for people who have dogs, et cetera, cats, right? Do you want to live with your girlfriend? And people say you can't live with someone else, or, what type of housing do you need? And then based off of that, they provide the majority of those housing services, and they're continuously doing the outreach to those individuals every single week and building that rapport with them. Because oftentimes the community, they feel like, either they've been burned by maybe someone from the organization due to stigma. Maybe they have misconceived notions about what being housed would entail, like all the rules, and they have to get a job. And some of these people haven't worked in like 30, 20, 15 years. And to force them into the job corps is like a culture shock for them, because they're not used to that. They're not even used to sleeping on beds. I remember when we used to house people and they would sleep outside in their patio, right? And so that became problems. And then we would have to do intensive case services with mental health services providers who would work and act as a buffer between the property manager and, everyone involved. They would be the mediator, but they would also be working consistently with the client to slowly progress them into living housed, right?
So I think one of the things that we might look at is so I think we've done a good job of developing housing, and we have developed housing that is doing a better job of housing some of the more chronically homeless population. And we still have a very visible, not just visible like they exist, but visible in their doing harmful behaviors that are impacting the community, that are, whether it's like mental illness and throwing rocks at cars, or, going to the bathroom right on someone's doorstep, or, these things that are just, that are hard for the community to deal with, that, are being arrested on a regular basis or are in and out of the emergency room. Like, we still have a good number of those folks. So looking at what are the housing models for specifically like the hardest to serve population might be helpful to see, because it's not just, a single apartment, or like, I think, there's a level of intensive services wrapped around them. Also, like, I don't want to say tolerance, but like, we're going to work with you no matter what kind of approach. Anyway, how do we do that?
It's almost like you need a stepping stone from total homelessness to, starting off low in the sense that they're closer to being homeless so that they're a little bit more comfortable, and then step up to maybe a motel room type situation, up to, maybe you want to think about getting a job, to finally getting into a house, climatizing them to get back to regular citizenry.
I mean, why aren't they, sorry. So, I mean, people who are regular citizens who still have mental health challenges and who still have stuff.
Oh, yeah, so that would be kind of almost a different altogether. The couple of homeless that I remember even from last year, because he made a big impression upon me, he was not interested in housing. He just wanted someplace to wash his clothes and someplace to get some food. He's perfectly fine outside with his dog, and that's part of the reason, because he had his dog and he didn't want to go where they put restrictions on it. So yeah, but he was not interested in housing.
But
They probably want housing.
As long as he could have his job.
Yeah.
yes, it's not that he didn't want housing. He wanted housing options that were.
Yeah.
Open with his dog, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So he
And
wanted housing.
so, I mean, I'm gonna pull us back to like, I don't want to start developing the strategic plan. Yeah, so I think the question is, where we need to move to is, how are we going to approach the strategic plan this cycle? With the I'm gonna push us to get to a key question of, are we starting over again, or are we gonna work with what we have? That's gonna be the first question, and then once we have the answer to that question, this is what I want to try to make us do. If you're gonna like, no, we won't approach it this way, that's fine too. Are we hiring a facilitator or are we not? That's kind of like this, because I'm thinking ahead to like, okay, I have to find a facilitator and do a contract, right? I'm thinking of like nuts and bolts of it. So that's why I want to push that.
And then Judy brought up the gaps analysis. I realized we could request a TA and request that we do it as a gaps analysis to inform our strategic plan and action, which are all required in COC legislation.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with race or DEI or anything like that. I think that it wouldn't get flagged.
You don't think it's been
Care.
killed yet? Well,
Yeah.
if it's been killed as an initiative, we can't ask
Right.
the TA for it, but you don't think it
Right,
is.
but I can still submit the request.
Right.
To get us started. I don't know how far it'll progress.
Okay, so that's an opportunity possible.
And that could be, we identify a contractor that way and maybe we extend it with local funding. Like maybe we do a contract as well, because HUD's gonna pay them through their contract.
I always think a facilitator is a really good idea because they're not like a content expert where they get lost in like how we're getting lost. That they're totally, they're totally focused on keeping us on track and looking at stuff, because I really think like one of the things that we should do as a group, and maybe facilitated would be great, is to go over these things like one at a time. Are they still relevant? Are they like, is the success at a point that we need to make sure we're like actively maintaining it? Or is that like, you know, a threshold that we like met and that it's
We
not
can
like a
declare
repetitive, we
success
can
and-
declare success and move on to other priority things with each of them. And then also looking as a group, because we did take this literally and we didn't add anything that wasn't in the Marbet report to this.
We did,
We-
I mean, we
yeah. All we
incorporated it in Marvin.
We incorporated the Marbet into it, so we didn't add anything else that might have been identified in our community from our partners as things that we need to work on. So kind of going through step by step, is there like a goal in here that's missing? I mean, I think I remember the whole process and it was pretty complete, but we
Yeah.
should kind of open that back up and look at it. And there's, you know, right now, as of this moment, there are a lot of resources available today that were not available 5 years ago. So we might be able to change like the action steps to incorporate some of those new resources.
I think you're right. And I think about some of the, not only the new housing that's been built since we did
Oh,
this,
yeah,
but
but Calais,
but-
Drug Medi-Cal.
but also one of our goals was to have a landlord liaison, which we
Right.
now have. One of our was to have a coordinated entry list manager, which we now have. It's not just Paige doing it out of like the
Right.
kindness of their heart.
Yes.
It's, you know, an actual
Yeah,
paid person.
Poorly.
right.
Well, it was, but now it's so like that is.
No, the current one is doing it great.
No, it's, I mean,
You're
but
amazing.
it's so much more organized than it ever was.
Mhm.
And that was specific in the strategic plan that we said we were gonna
We
do.
moved to those things because of this.
So I'm hearing that, so last time around, we had a local facilitator and we
Mhm.
also had, Veronica, were they from HUD, the TAC people, was that?
Yeah.
So we had this sort of,
Yeah,
we requested help and they gave it to us.
The,
And it worked out pretty well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it was like just a few sessions.
Yeah, it was.
To get us directed on the
Yeah.
right way to go. And then we can decide from there if we want more help or if we have enough to go
Right.
there.
But we had Maury local, who was kind of keeping us on track and had local knowledge as well. So sometimes I feel like outside facilitators from, I love the outside perspective, but if they like have no knowledge of Mendocino County at all, you have to spend a lot of time educating them on
Yeah.
Mendocino County.
I can't speak for our council member, but Mari has expressed interest and asked questions regarding COC matters and things like that. So she is still kind of engaged or at least
Mhm.
interested in that area.
And she was really, really good about like looping us back when we got on tangents.
Yes.
Cause like, yeah. Cause we're all really invested in the work we do and.
So if we were to get some free TA from technical assistance from HUD specifically on kind of the gaps analysis type of situation, and I think, Veronica, I feel like there's funding within the funding sources we have for a local facilitator. It wouldn't be that
Right,
expensive.
but this could get us started.
Yeah, no, we can go down both roads.
Absolutely.
And, okay, I don't want to speak for the group, but what I feel like I'm hearing is a local facilitator and let's accept some HUD technical assistance offered. And maybe enough has happened that we need to start over again. Is that what you're feeling?
I don't know.
No,
I
you don't.
don't look at.
Heather has said this and I agree. And so just to reiterate that I think taking a deeper look at where we're at with the current strategic plan goals. And maybe even doing some sort of like survey analysis or something of like, these were our goals. Do you want to keep, remove, or like keep, graduate, keep with revisions or something, like maintain with revisions or retire, but just that we look at each of them and go like, and I think really looking at what worked to inform like the action steps that we're taking, that we're not losing the work that we've done. I feel like if we just start over from scratch, we run the risk of like overlooking some of the things that have happened in the last 5 years.
I appreciate the form of the document. I feel, and I like that there are only 4 overarching goals and they address both big picture items and organizational meaning COC items. So there's, you know, big stuff and then really kind of introspective stuff. I agree. I think the strategies and the action needs to be revisited, but I guess I would be less interested in reinventing the wheel and creating an entirely new document. I mean, goal number 1 is make homelessness rare. Is that
Still our plan.
It's still a goal.
Yeah.
And HUD has adopted those same
4
Right.
categories.
Oh, okay, all right, well, that's helpful.
Yeah,
So the people like the format.
Yeah.
The format seems to have worked for us.
yeah.
County.
And the overarching goals are great.
Mm-hmm.
And I think here, again, especially people are still asking about the Margaret report, and this came directly from.
Keep
that.
saying it over
That.
Why do they think, like, do they think he's has the solution?
Don't, you know, from what I
You know,
heard is we paid a lot of money for him to come in and do this, and he got a lot of national recognition, and so his name.
I think he's a polarizing person.
Yeah.
He's sort of unpleasant,
Yes.
but some people latched on to that because he would say things out loud that maybe were not everybody agreed with. But when we actually looked at his a lot of his recommendations were things like, we totally were doing, use HMIS. I
Right.
mean, there was a lot of stuff in there that was not,
He came up with.
it was not controversial. We all agreed with, no.
Yes.
And the thing he did come up with that was brand new, that was not illegal, that was not legal, our HUD TA people were the people who helped resolve that. So I don't know if you all remember, but one of the things he didn't write down, but he talked a lot about was stratifying services based on how long somebody lived in Mendocino County. We wasted a lot of time kind of going through
Oh, it's so
that
much.
process of trying to see if we could do that. And these outside consultants,
1% of people that.
well, we just went down a rabbit hole that it turned out that our outside observer was like, you're getting close to something that's violating fair housing, violating discrimination laws, like not a good idea.
Mhm.
And so we course corrected.
Mhm.
But I think Marbut himself was just kind of
Well, I
elicited strong emotions for people.
I remember the
Somebody
public,
right now.
I remember the public meeting was really well attended,
Yes.
and there were some people who really protested the report. And,
It was hard though.
well, I mean, even though, because one of the ones that he debunked, was that idea that the homeless population was coming from
All from
outside.
outside, I know.
Yes.
Outside the area. And he really debunked
He
that
did.
because it was a really high percentage. I think it was 60+ were
Yeah.
local.
85.
Was it that high?
Yeah.
It was really
It was really high, yeah.
But then he didn't like that there were so many sites where people could come into and he wanted that more coordinated. And I think that
Not so many
one of the-
providers.
Yes, one of the main protesters was which doesn't exist anymore, it's been taken over by the Gospel Church. They just didn't like his presentation. He was a kind of a fiery guy.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
think. I think he was a kind of polarizing figure.
Yeah,
And I think he liked to be a polarizing figure. That's his thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's a good question, Angelica. I found his actual report was useful. A lot of it was what we were already doing. He did debunk some myths that I think were important.
Yes,
To get some clarity on.
Uh-huh.
And then it just became this thing that I don't know. I figure it out.
Is none of the research or work that Dr. Marbut has done is peer reviewed. And they're self-published.
Mhm. Yeah.
and then.
Anyway.
Onward.
Yeah, but I think the report and what we had agreed in the original strategic planning group is that 20 out of the 22 or whatever recommendations were things we could actually work on, that we were kind of
Yeah.
moving in the direction of anyways. And yeah,
I do think there's a chance that we're not going to be able to.
Street level.
no,
Visible homelessness.
I think that, I'm being reminded, and I'd be interesting if Paul weighs in this too. There are elected officials on the coast who are close to Marbut. They really value him. I was asked directly by a supervisor, how would you feel if Dr. Marbut reviewed your plan? This was not about the strategic plan, but it was a homeless related initiative. And I was like, sure, great. So I do think there's a chance that there are policymakers in this community who really value his perspective. And I think I welcome perspectives from all kinds of places. I think it would be a mistake for us not to be open to his presence if that shows up in that way. I don't know if it will. Paul, I know you just put something in your mouth and I just sort of called you out.
Sorry, that's my fault though. I knew you were gonna call on me. Well, you're right about that. His Marbut's opinion is valued by at least one of them. And I agree. I think we should hear all perspectives. I also think that we should always be ready to quickly answer. For example, what you were talking about before, where we looked into ways to limit services to people who have been in the county for X amount of time. If that comes up again, we should be able to really solidly answer why that isn't being done, or that it was looked into and how it was looked into, and it's just not something we can do.
Or should do.
Or should do.
Right.
No, sorry, the state of California has done some really amazing data collection and reporting out on migration between COC services that I just keep in my pocket to be able to.
Well, don't get me wrong. I don't think it's something we should do either, but it shortens the conversation if it was looked into. And
I agree, Paul. I think there's some short, easy answers on that we have not perfected. And for what I've said is, for one thing, it appears to be illegal for these various reasons. And the other example I always give is, what if you had a refugee, people want to, if you had a refugee that fled here from Chile, I'm picking a completely random country, right? And they had arrived in your country, would you really, in your community,
Would you say,
they're a political asylum or fleeing violence, would you really say they can't stay in the shelter because they haven't lived in this community for, so when you start putting it into the, what does that literally mean for you? People recognize that's not appropriate. The VA will say over and over again, they place veterans from Mendocino County in places in Sonoma County, in the San Francisco, all the time. If those counties started saying, well, we're not going to welcome your vets, what would we do? Literally, what would we do? So but we need to get efficient at answering those
but
questions.
it is interesting, domestic violence shelters serve oftentimes only their county. And
So if somebody flees out of their county, what do you, really?
well,
Wild.
yeah,
Because
they'll do that.
you might
Well,
need to leave the county.
The YWCA will say, we don't want anybody from another county, because they have so many people coming from their own county. Lake County.
Difficult.
If our people was having to flee to another county, I'd want them to get help.
I know, but Lake County Shelter will ask people, do you have a relative or somebody in the county that you
Yeah,
know?
they're the one that.
Or otherwise, we don't.
I think that's an interesting point. Because you're looking at when you have a limited resource, what do you do? But wait, again, we're getting sidetracked. We obviously need a facility.
I just want to share, Sage is right. The Homeless Data Integration System, HDIS, for the state of California. One of the measures is how many people where people show up in more than one COC database. And it says that in a 3-year period from 22 to 24, 96% of California, people in California receive services in only one COC.
Wow.
4% access services in 2 continuums of care.
Neighboring.
And neighboring, so that would be Lake to Mendo or Humboldt to Mendo.
So minimal.
And less than 1% access services in more than 3 COCs.
So that gets
Enough rather than it's illegal.
It's a false issue, is what you're saying. Like, it's not even a-
We spend a lot of time talking about this issue when it starts coming up again. Why, when we're talking about
When 96%
1% of the
Yeah,
population that
yeah.
we're serving maybe falls into this multiple COC category.
Maximum.
But I think that's a good point, Sage, and it goes again to what Paul's saying, if we had an efficient way to answer that.
Messaging.
Just
Our
use
3 bullet
facts.
points and this, yeah.
Yeah, just use facts.
And even that won't work sometimes.
And even
Yeah.
that won't work.
Coding, just like
Yes,
MCHSCoC,
yes.
that kind of the same. So you're not gonna change their minds, but yes, provide.
Because people are invested in the storyline they're telling themselves,
Exactly.
yeah.
Mhm.
I almost feel, okay, so I'm, try again, obviously, okay. It feels like people have felt,
Yeah.
people like the structure of our current strategic plan, don't want to start all over in that way. But an outside facilitator would help us do a much more substantial look at this than not just like an internal revision, which is what we did last time 2 years ago. Okay, so in that case, I feel like we could call it another plan, not necessarily a revision from our old one, but this will still be the core. And we will make sure that we highlight the progress that's been made. I think is really important, because
Yes.
otherwise, if something is dealt with and we never mention it again, we're not doing ourselves a favor by explaining this was an issue. We've made a ton of progress on it.
Right.
So,
I have a question about content.
okay.
The original plan has a multi-page narrative about
Yeah.
our COC and all kinds of statistics that are all outdated. How much of that do we want to retain? Pare that down to just explaining what our system is? Do you want to keep it at the robust level it is with revisions?
We just make it like an executive summary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One page.
But I mean, if we have appendix, like for historical data that we've created, so we could have our current plan. And I was kind of envisioning like our progress can be like a fourth column. So like we have a historical like running data of like what we are doing in our local community. So every time we look at the plan, we're seeing
I like that idea, Heather. So you're thinking like a strategy,
Yeah.
what we want to do to
What we
accomplish that
do.
strategy and what we've already done.
yeah,
And like things
Right.
can start moving
And
from
I
one column to the other.
right. And the concepts are important here too.
The
So
comments were supposed to be kind of like
Right.
what we've already done, yeah.
Okay, yeah, but so that we have like this historical data, because I know we get lost in the weeds sometimes, or like the forest for the trees kinds of things, because we forget how it was, because how it is like our daily day in, day out.
What you're talking about, the regionally coordinated homelessness action
Yeah.
plan through Cal ICH
Yeah.
actually does exactly that, is it shows the progress over time.
And so I think that whatever summary that we had at the beginning should be like kept as like an appendix to, like with just the dates when it was relevant. And then we could do, yeah, the
Even if we
executive
hire,
summary.
we hire a consultant, they might just update the data to give us some current.
I mean, we could ask them to do some data review part of the, I know that section was pretty lengthy in the beginning, Veronica. I'm not, like, I didn't bring that original copy with me, but I think I agree with Shannon that some narrative is necessary, but maybe
Not that
condensed.
much.
Yeah,
Because the public doesn't actually have that much.
They don't read
No.
that.
Don't they?
no,
We just heard at the conference that the public officially has a less of an attention span than a goldfish, you know?
it's like one line per second.
So whatever you guys have 23 seconds of content.
Yes.
Okay.
The place where that stuff is helpful though, is actually to be able to have some good data and content to copy and paste when we're writing grants.
Yeah.
So the data part of it.
It's super, I've used it for,
But maybe not
this
that.
is what Mendocino County is about, to this random funder and
Yes.
some other
Does that
community.
exist somewhere else, or does it have to be part of the strategic plan?
No, not necessarily. I just have used it because I've gone, this thing already exists. I don't have to invent
Does
it.
it exist anywhere else? Is there kind of a data?
Not
dashboard
exactly that. And I think that
Not in a
it's.
narrative form in that way.
And if we're paying for a thing, like might as well develop and have an ongoing, like.
But when, I mean, whether, yeah, the county, the COC or the agencies, when they could say as referenced in the strategic plan, so that it's all tied back to.
Well, even if the general public doesn't read it, we need to.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I forget, you know.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah.
it's nice to know. You know, this is, and I probably went off, I'm gonna go off track here. Right.
We don't have the facilitator yet.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay, we don't have a facility, but, you know, I noticed, I don't know why, but I love the live oak apartment concept as much as. And I don't know whether there's enough data to go ahead and say that we also, because I would assume also there's gonna be less money for all the housing that we got like in the last 5 years. I might be wrong, but, you know. But like the recommendation, like if we highlighted some of that, you know, in terms of, because I know, I remember when the live oak was being redone, you had said like, well, Fort Bragg had that opportunity, but they
Yeah.
chose not to do it,
Yeah.
you know, and it just seems like redoing apartments, you know, for single people, seniors, the blend, some with, you know, just a couple of kids with a security person at the front thing that kind of slows down some of the other stuff that kind of happens for, you know, people just moving into housing just really helps. And I've known quite a few clients who have lived there and really appreciated it. I just think it's a good concept but it's the only one we have in the whole county.
Of that specific kind of model, yeah.
Yes.
I think, I mean, it makes me think that maybe within the plan though, we can highlight a few projects that have been really successful within the last 5 years. Because, I mean, Live Oak is big and it was kind of like there was a lot of community attention on it. There are other small projects that, I mean, RCS has tucked away, like that are kind of tucked away that we probably could highlight as well
Yeah.
without as much.
Yeah.
Because they just weren't,
That we just don't
they're lucky they weren't in the limelight the
Yeah.
same way.
necessarily always pay attention to or.
Yeah.
But it seems to me like, yeah,
It's okay.
but highlighting what we've piloted,
Yeah.
that seems to have worked.
Yeah.
And would be, because we've certainly learned a lot about that project and we've learned a lot how to staff it. We've learned a lot about the
Yes.
costs. We've learned a lot about, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Was it RCS who's put out the thing about maybe needing more money? Okay, I'm not trying to be negative, but in other words, when you just put new people into apartments sometimes and they haven't been in apartments, the adjustments that happen in terms of like water damage, fires. I can't remember who just put out a plea that their insurance costs, maybe it wasn't RCS,
God, I don't know.
for low income housing of placing people in
It was
because of.
RCHTC. Yeah, said that at one of the COC meetings.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the cost of damages.
The cost of damages.
Yeah.
I think, there's even little practical things like many people who've been living out, they're just not quite used to toilet paper in the same way. They often use
Way too much.
or like a sock or something,
Right,
like
yeah.
there's like a lot of toilet problems.
Yeah.
And buildings like that, and people are not sure.
Lots of things.
No, that's what they were talking about, the additional cost of liability for the plumbing, for the
Yes.
citizens,
Yeah.
accidental fires,
Yeah.
We have a
Yeah.
landlord liaison,
Yeah.
but we don't have like a landlord remediation fund to help offset the.
We don't have an organized one. It would be nice
Yeah.
to have an organized one.
Yeah.
It's in their contract. They can use the funding
Yeah, but
It's in whose contract?
in CDC's landlord liaison. They can fund mitigation.
I think that it's sort of the same way we haven't, it's not super organized and it's not.
Because
How
once
you
the
access
client,
it and.
the clients
Exactly.
exited once they move in.
Okay.
And the damage happens later and they're not eligible to reapply to the program, so.
Oh, because they're already housed.
Yeah, so it's like, it's weird. I don't really, we haven't had any situation where requests came through that I was involved in.
Right.
right.
I have something else before
Okay.
we move on. So about the narrative, historically, my predecessors would do a giant plan because it met the COC strategic plan requirements, but also the county was required to do abbreviated consolidated plan. Does that mean anything to you, Angelica, or
Is that part of the housing element
I'm
or?
surprised. For what?
the abbreviated
Yeah.
consolidated plan?
For what? What were they required?
I think it was for ESG.
I know what a consolidated plan, and there are abbreviated ones for certain types of
What are
funding. Because our jurisdiction generally doesn't do consolidated plans.
What is a consolidated plan?
I think I've seen Sandy Kennedy. They would do an abbreviated consolidated plan that the county and the COC both had to approve.
Is a consolidated plan around what? Plan for
Housing.
Housing.
like a big, not just homelessness, it was like.
Yeah, housing in general.
But was it a?
Oh, it sounds like a housing element.
Was it like a
So,
budget
yeah, 'cause-
breakdown too, like what they were planning?
I don't remember. That was the one that when I came in and you had this, I don't know what to do with this, Brian, that was an abbreviated
No,
consolidated.
I certainly remember that term,
It's like
that
for
there
the
was some.
settlement jurisdictions, they generally have
Right.
consolidated plans, but we don't, but for certain types of funding, so there's abbreviated consolidated plans.
So
In two thousand and
HCD,
11, the COC had to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds about right, because that's when Kennedy, yeah.
so recent, so
to 2016, right?
it sounds about right.
Yeah.
Maybe a little earlier than 16, but the HCD has since issued a consolidated plan that covers ESG and ESGC. So my question is, do we need to do abbreviated consolidated plan?
Whatever that is. We haven't, I remember what you're talking about, Veronica. There was some box we had to check saying that we had done an abbreviated consolidated plan and we were able to check it because we had done this like bigger
Right.
narrative. So
But
why
if-
don't you and I do the research on that and find out what,
Okay.
because I haven't heard it mentioned in a while, but it definitely was.
But I don't want to lose track of that.
Yeah.
If this document can be twofold, I don't know if somebody else in the county was assigned that. Or if it got dropped, I just have no clue.
You're totally right, though. I remember like something about.
And there's nothing past 2016 in Google, so It's a 5-year plan.
Yes.
And so from 2016, 17 till now,
Must be outdated.
it must be updated. So-
Right. I mean, it looks like the strategic plan,
It is the
just a
strategic
little bit
plan.
more robust and stuff,
Exactly.
but
Who was requiring it of us?
Yes, I think.
All I remember is Kathleen Stone would come in and say, I've got this, it's got components that the COC are relevant to you. It's also got
Oh.
bigger swaths that I've worked with other county departments on that you don't really have to worry about. These are the sections you need to look at. So never looked at the rest.
it's the strategic plan, just with a different name.
Right, but it had a lot
Reading it,
more. And
yeah.
I don't want to do a disservice to the county if
Okay,
they're required to
well,
do something.
Veronica, you and I will do that research. We'll find out if there's an abbreviated consolidated plan required by whom and why, and if we can combine them together so we don't end up doing two competing documents.
Right.
The last plan says it's required by HUD.
Yeah, but if HCD is doing it and we're a non-entitlement community, are we covered by theirs?
Yes,
Yes, but COC, I don't
I
know.
haven't heard it mentioned in a really long time.
But
And in
I get the impression reading this, it's the strategic plan required by HUD. So I don't think it's gonna be that hard.
Okay, but we'll figure that out. Yeah. Let's remember that. But so it sounds, I'm looking at number 4 on our agenda. I'm wondering if I could have a motion from the committee that the strategic direction we are going to take is to develop a new strategic plan rooted in our current format. I was trying to get us to say a new one, review the old one, and you guys are choosing a third path, which is the facility process and extensive revision, but it's not actually a revision. It's just really don't want to lose what's in the current plan.
Available.
And if they can condense, whoever you're contracting with, if they can condense the report into something visual, like a little PowerPoint slide or
Mhm.
something
Good
of that
idea.
nature, just for the public, because
The 26 seconds.
yeah, like they're not gonna read all that rhetoric and it's gonna be a little bit too much for them, overwhelming for them. And so they might just want something visual.
So is it to request HUD TA assistance to review the existing strategic plan and assist with developing a gaps analysis no?
What do you think of the motion?
Well, because we would like to hire a local facilitator to assist.
After we get HUD TA.
Yeah,
What if you want it to be the same person?
No, we need a
No, we
local
don't.
facilitator. We're not gonna, the HUD TA person's not gonna be local.
yeah.
Sure.
Think of a local HUD TA person?
It doesn't matter if they're,
I'm almost
great if they were, but they're two separate entities is all.
I think,
If we want a local, I'm kind of thinking we don't want a local facilitator because yeah, they'll know our community, but
Let's do
are
it.
they gonna,
what's your concern about a local facilitator?
they're gonna be vested in something.
Well, I think we should hire a facilitator who's vested in getting us through the process.
Invested in the outcome, invested. So many people, like, I live here and I want this encampment to be gone behind my house.
Well,
They don't say
let's have to
anything.
think, what we want to hire is somebody who just facilitates a process, like a
Right,
process
yeah.
facilitator.
And then we have TA to help us with some of the like expertise guidance.
Well, Ronnie, you and I will have to figure this out and come back to the committee with some options around a facilitator.
So maybe they don't make a motion. Maybe they decide that they don't want to decide and they want it out.
I think we have a thing.
Yeah.
We don't need to say whether we're hiring an inside or an outside facilitator to make a motion on.
But that's what Heather said, but you want to just say hire a facilitator, but let's like not lock ourselves in.
I want to make a motion, because I think I have it, to hire a facilitator to help us to facilitate a strategic plan process, including engaging HUD TA to conduct a gaps analysis.
Okay, you're going way too fast.
Sorry.
Hire a facilitator to facilitate strategic plan
Process,
process.
Like that.
including
Revision, right?
engaging HUD TA to conduct a gaps analysis and provide expertise.
So I'm gonna say assist with gaps analysis.
Right.
Because they wouldn't do it.
Right.
Yeah. utilizing the existing strategic plan as a foundation to build our new one.
As a foundation to build a new one. Sounds good. Okay.
I'll second that. motion.
Okay, it's all right. It's, I was trying to force like a binary choice here, but we got a third way, so it's fine.
My group, we include data and also the executive summary and.
I think we
No,
should.
we can work that
We
out.
can work that out.
Well, you know what, I like the idea of those, Camila, you said that, but I was sort of thinking, because I was going to like what the contract with the facilitator would look like. And I kind of want them to do a public PowerPoint to accompany,
Oh.
because like, get us, we know we're gonna need that. I'd love to have it right from the get-go. Like this is what the dense report was, which no one will read. So we also want to leave, I mean, we will, but not the public won't, but there'll be a public visual.
So that is a contract deliverable.
Yes, that's what it is. It's like,
And not just the
contract.
PowerPoint, but also like snippet graphics that we.
I want a one-page infographic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Infographic. Oh, we just want everything. Adding to the list.
So I got hire a facilitator to facilitate the strategic plan process, including engaging HUD TA to assist with the gaps analysis, utilizing our existing strategic plan as a foundation for developing a new strategic plan. I'm gonna say utilizing the existing.
That sounds good. Okay, there's a motion on the table by Sage.
I seconded it, yeah.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Stay on right.
So that's Carolyn.
I'm not a member. I'm just.
Yeah, you are.
We think you're a member.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Was-
thought I was just an
WSAG
invited.
is a COC member organization.
Oh,
I think your strat plan, I think it's four.
Yes, Judy is a yes, Shannon's a yes. Did you vote? Yes. Heather's a yes, Camille's a yes, and Sage is a yes. That way I can watch the recording and write it down for the minutes.
Great.
How about
We
Paul?
did an action. Okay.
How do you vote?
Yes, too.
What?
What?
Oh, he's gonna type it
I
in.
think he said yes.
Like, I'm here.
I
better
it
say
sounds
yes
like
too.
so much more than yes. Okay, while we figure out what Paul is. Are you a yes, Paul?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Okay, all right, so I'm moving on to item 5. B, we just talked about the facilitation, so let me go back up to A for a second. I think I was gonna say we should set a meeting schedule, but I'm actually thinking that I don't know how long it's gonna take for Veronica and I to kind of identify some facilitators and get the answers around the HUD TA. So why don't we leave that for now, and I will, I'll just have to schedule that through a polling process, I think. But I don't think we're probably gonna meet for another month because it's gonna take us a little time to figure out those elements.
Could I suggest that we do kind of maybe meet? I know there's holidays often on Mondays, but at the same time, the COC meets.
Oh, alternative, like Monday afternoons?
Just because I have those days,
Yeah.
I'm kind of blocked off.
Okay, we can. Today's not Monday, but okay,
Today's not Monday.
Right.
but Still.
okay.
Are you talking before or after?
No, you mean an alternate week. You don't mean the same day.
Not on the same day.
Oh,
Yes.
Is that what
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Alternate.
An alternate week. Okay, yeah. We kind of just keep Monday afternoons protected generally.
Generally.
Any Monday after.
Okay,
Yes.
not the COC week.
Yeah, right. My God. That would make a very long.
Yeah, that would be a lot. Okay, so the other question I wanted to ask was additional stakeholders to include. Is there, so this group is a little small, but doesn't totally matter.
Are the folks that signed up that are not here today?
Priest, who probably would normally be coming. Denise, I think Denise does want to come. Clive declined. I have a feeling she still does want to participate. So we could just stick with our group. I didn't know if there was any specific people or organizations that you really felt needed to be represented that we don't have here.
About someone's lived experience.
That would be good.
Because I was really impressed, just yesterday that, how many people showed up to help with the pit count with lived experience. Although I want to point out that, I'm pretty sure that everybody in this room is getting paid, by their job to be here. Is there like a stipend to, oh, separate? Okay, I wasn't sure, but yeah. That's okay.
Even hard for the county experience got paid.
No, they did, yes, what she said.
Yeah, no, but I'm just wondering for this process, if there's any like,
I think it sounds like what you're saying, Heather, is that
Process,
when
yeah.
you're being paid, you show up professionally
Yes.
and invested because your time is being valued as it
Yes,
should.
right.
It's talking about
And there-
incentives.
Right, yeah, and their perspective
was
is
really helpful.
very helpful.
It's so hard for the county to do that, but Veronica and I, that was why our consultant was able to do that with a pile of cash, which we.
Right.
Well, that is our consultant that we hired.
We
not
could-
incentive
Right, I know.
fund. But
We might be able to work that into the
Right.
contract.
I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if there's a way to do that, because I think that would be really appropriate.
It was an element missing from the strategic plan where the like stakeholder engagement and not necessarily just having somebody on the committee doing the work, but like, how are we soliciting the input from people who are in this?
Right.
Which we continue to kind of struggle with.
Strategic
Those-
plan goal 2.4
Yeah.
Mhm.
is on exactly this.
Yeah,
And then FYI, I think we should include some local churches.
Mm.
I know that there are several churches in Ukiah that are getting together because of the cold weathering. They're opening up their churches and letting some of the in-house sleep there.
Used to happen.
Where is this?
Yeah, it's like they're all getting together. It's like.
Is there a leader amongst that group, Camille, that you know? 'Cause
Yes, I do.
You do know who the leader is,
Yes, I do.
and you're not remembering their name right now, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
yeah, okay.
Remember
Oh, right. Think of my text message or something.
Once will you let Veronica and I know?
Yes,
When she
yes,
gets
of
that
course.
Because engaging the church community in some sort of organized way has always been hard. So if there's a leaderish type person, I would love to know.
I mean, a long time ago, it used to happen.
They used to have a council or something.
Yes, there is still a council of all of the different ministers and pastors.
Really?
Are they
They
active?
still meet every month.
No.
Really?
Yes. It's just very secretive because they don't want the public bombarding.
I think it's Ginger, my church sister Ginger, but if not, I'll ask her because she was sitting next in our little area. I
Okay.
think it's Ginger, so I'll
Okay.
reach out to her and then I'll give her your contact information. She said she wants to come and sit down at the COC meeting next month.
Okay.
So you'll see her.
And I can reach out to Tony Huerta to see if. he-
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Is he still around?
Yeah, retired.
Oh,
Like Michelle Robbins, the Methodist Church.
Okay.
A lot of work. And I know Willits, I don't know specifically who, but I know that there's like Willits churches are invested.
Well, Carolyn's a good connection to, not
St. Francis.
St. Francis.
Yeah.
Well, this group is sort of like a work group. We don't need a bigger, I mean, we
No,
just
yeah.
feeling like if there was a categorical gap, and it sounds like the faith-based community might be a category.
Part of the deliverables we might think about for the contractor would be, so Megan, your team did this required stakeholder meeting open to the public.
Was
Oh
a bit of a
my
mess. Oh my God, I was right as the wildest.
oh my gosh. They never wanted to do another one. Oh, if I remember
But we
correctly.
learned a lot from that. But
You guys did amazing with it, and they did. She did amazing with it.
we held it together.
Hard.
I was completely traumatized. What do you know?
No, it was
really hard to do those.
It's really hard to do.
The thing that I got out of it though, being at B2, like we get a lot of exposure and a lot of feedback and a lot of people talking to us about the things that they want. So like,
You're used to that.
great. There were people who came to that who never come to B2. So we got a different perspective that was really helpful to hear. Hard to hear, but helpful to hear. And so if we're having a facilitator who's doing some stuff, what would it look like for them to hold some public stakeholder groups?
That actually gave space for what those people who showed up wanted to talk about, because that had a function
Yeah.
that needed to get through,
Yeah.
and
I think I had these
Yeah.
mixed feelings about, I mean, for me, it was a really important learning experience because people really wanted to express themselves, like it was obvious need.
Yeah.
But when you had multiple demographics all in the same room, it needed really solid facilitation, because I felt like it was important for like the angry community members to hear from the angry people with lived experience, but I was not prepared for that. And so I also sometimes wonder though, a space for people with lived experience without having to kind of like manage everybody else's opinions is also important. So I'm not sure the right answer.
You just need
That-
a good person who, with lived experience, is like the Obama in the room.
Wonder if we might be able to,
Who's a
sorry.
person who's like,
I was not the Obama.
through the experience with Obama in the room, it's like they have the ability to like, someone who comes with me with the negative perspectives, I'm very understanding of their lack of knowledge, but then I also gear them towards the heart.
Right.
Because they just don't know what that kind of world looks like, because they've never experienced it. It's the lack of empathy. So like changing it and like telling them in a kind way what your experiences is, and also respecting that both of your experiences are different, but this makes mine real just as much as it makes yours. You know?
Can I share about our conversations with Camille? What? The plan. Lived experience board.
I mean, you can, I mean.
I thought you said DEI, I was like, that's down the
About
DEI.
the need for a lived experience board, which you've been trying to make
Right,
it
so
ever.
in our HAP 3-4 RFP, one of the activities was to contractor to facilitate a lived experience board. So a group of people like at B2 or whatever, who this contractor would organize them and maybe be a spokesperson, maybe they would assist a spokesperson. It just depends on who's there and how they want to do it. We've been talking to Camille about doing that. My thought is that would be separate from the strategic plan facilitator. And what if the facilitator worked with the lived experience board coordinator and the two of them kind of.
I mean, I think that would be a great thing to include in the facilitator's contract if this timeline lines up.
If it lines up.
That's, yeah.
You know.
If we're able to get a lived experience board going and however we are, it would be really great for the facilitator to use that board to engage in the strategic planning process.
And
And you know, and there's
us what they.
there's cool models like a fishbowl process where like we could just watch the lived experience board interact, but we're not, those of us without lived experience aren't getting in the way.
Right.
We get to hear the conversation. So, but
Another
okay,
stakeholder to engage though, is, so
in
as
this process.
in this process. Maybe not a stakeholder to engage like on an ongoing basis, but maybe, but a resource to make sure to connect with is the Adventist Health right now is doing their health needs assessment and plan. That's a pretty extensive process. Like they spend like 3 years working on it and they hired some expert body to do the things. Anyway, so talking to like Jeremy Malin
Yeah.
about, because they've done a bunch of public forums in specific sites, like they did one at B2, they've done one at Hospitality Center, I think, maybe. They're just doing they did a bunch of like public forum stakeholder groups.
So they might have something to bring.
And so they
Data
might
gathering.
have some data for us to leverage.
Who was that? Was it Jeremy Malin who was the
Yeah.
kind of point person on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's who I would reach out to.
Also,
And I think
and I'm reluctant to say this, but Mendo Matters is continuing to organize. I've got a fictitious business name. They are looking to elect or appoint an official speaker. So they might have a point person. Strategically speaking, it might be advantageous to have them engaged in the process.
And Mendo
I think so too.
Yeah.
a group that is focused on.
Yep.
On
You're probably familiar with them. I don't, they're aligned now. Well, what they've done is, I don't know if anyone remembers the Employers Council from way back when.
Oh, I was wondering what the connection was there. Are they?
Yeah, they're basically resurrecting the Employers Council. It'll be called Mendo Matters. It's Carrie Vaugh, Martha Barra, other kind of prominent business folks. I believe they're closely aligned with the Farm Bureau, but this is an area of interest for them.
Who's their current point person? Is it Carrie
I think Carrie is the one who took out the fictitious business name.
Under Mendo Matters?
Yes.
Okay.
So is it
Well-
really to kind of make the city, upgrade the city, and so that would mean clean up homelessness?
I believe they intend to be an advocacy group.
Are they focused
so-
only on homelessness? Because that's only I ever hear, but I don't know if there's other issues. too.
Well, I don't know yet. Yeah, the
Mm.
Employers Council tended to be basically a more conservative advocacy group. And then when there were matters of diverse topics of interest to them, they're speaking.
Beyond homelessness, there's all kinds of things there,
Yeah,
yeah.
they would come to a city council meeting or a board of
Mhm.
supervisors meeting. So kind of like a chamber of commerce in some communities
Mhm.
might do. They represent that contingency, but their primary area of focus, to my knowledge, to date has been homelessness. And at times they've been operating on misinformation and things like that. And so it just strategically, it might be advantageous to engage them in the process. Particularly if they can nominate a single person.
Mhm. How does the committee feel about inviting them? I mean, I think the chances of them wanting to engage in a whole long process is not 100%. So they,
I mean-
but there could be some value in the invitation, even if the.
I mean, I might be the devil's advocate, but I think the point of contact shouldn't be someone with a conservative background with no lived experience. Either it be me or priest, woo woo, I vote for priest. I want it to be a person who has that empathetic lens, who has that professional lens, and who has that backstory because it's more powerful, you know, as opposed to me seeing someone politicizing homelessness and possibly getting it wrong because they're just reading misinformation or journal articles that aren't geared towards the true understanding or
I think
outdated,
they'll want to be engaged.
but engagement.
I think they'll want to be engaged, yeah, and it might be informative and educational for them because of that exposure.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think for many reasons, it's a good idea to invite them. I mean, I also think that the strategic planning committee has not been, it's not typically like, we're actually deeply in the weeds doing stuff that's not that politically exciting, which I think is important to show the community that we do a lot of work that's like not exciting to the public, but it's deeply meaningful because there's not this awareness that that work is being done. And then people don't know what coordinated and treatment is. They don't know what HMS means. They don't know.
Probably a way to educate them
Yes,
about
that's
a
what I
lot
think.
of that stuff, and they do talk.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, yeah, because the amount of misinformation that goes around in the places that are, you know, seeing like our services that we provide at odds with their goals, it really does bring them around, gives them good information. And that way that, yeah, it gets spread.
I think it's helpful to invite them and even have, I mean, their perspective is important. You know,
Right.
if it sometimes is
Yes.
skewed by misinformation that,
Absolutely.
that, just like my perspective is skewed
Right.
by my scope, right? And that more importantly, even if we have common goals, like we, at the end of the day, we want the same thing, which is to
Right.
not have visible homelessness,
Yes,
not have
right.
people unhoused, not have people living in need.
And we want strategies that work.
And we want strategies that work
Right.
and our approaches may not always be the same in terms of like how we think we should get there, but I think it would help us maybe provide the education and stuff, but also not just around like what works, but also that we want the same thing.
Right.
Right. And I'm not, sorry, I just want to put it on the table. I'm not opposed to inviting, everybody should be at the table, right? In my opinion. I just believe as far as like speaking on behalf of COC, I think.
Oh, well, they were not gonna be a.
No, yes. Okay, I was like, I'm kind of scared. I'm just saying is that I don't want to hear anything about Trump.
Their organization themselves is trying to figure out a 1 point person.
1 point.
So we would
Sorry,
invite that person
apologize.
to.
My misunderstanding.
Yeah, no, we're not gonna give them the
And they might have a real misconception about where, like, that there's actually a lot of common ground here.
yeah.
That's what the misconception is.
Yeah, it's my misconception.
There continues to be a belief that those of us that work with homelessness want more homelessness so that we can
Or something.
stay employed.
My God.
So we have an opportunity to start.
Yes.
Or they were buying dog food or they're.
I have a lot of marketable skills that probably be
Free
making more money somewhere
I
else.
Right,
So,
with
you know.
Netflix show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll reach out to Carrie. Again, I think the chances, we'll see. I think it's good to invite the whole.
Yeah.
I, believe it or not, have a pretty decent relationship with her, so I'd be happy to if.
Will you mention it
that's
to her and then
more
I'm,
comfortable.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay.
All right, any other stakeholders we feel is essential to be at the table right now? Okay, I mean, that can change over time too. The last item I wanted to figure out was a timeline for development. I'm gonna be realistic. I think if we need to hire a facilitator, I mean, this last time we did this process, it was at least 6 months.
It was at least.
It was, might have been longer. I think we're looking at the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think this is gonna be kind of our year. We'll finish before the end of the year.
Yeah.
But it might not be till late summer,
Mhm.
to be honest.
When does the current plan expire?
We didn't have it.
It doesn't, it's,
Oh,
We
okay.
didn't have but it's pretty old now.
yeah.
I mean, it predates the pandemic.
I have a random thought about structure. I'm wondering if the city's budget might be kind of an interesting model. Next to each action step, if you will, there's like a drop-down menu with 3 choices, I think, and it says, in progress or completed or, future goals or whatever, or something other, and then there's a place for a comment. But it allows for a really easy to read, like visually, you can see every single item, whether it's completed, in progress, or not yet done, or whatever. And then there's a numbering system that I'm not gonna explain well, that somehow, once an item is completed, it stays on the plan or the budget for 1 year. So you can see it's been completed and then it drops off. It would still be like in an appendix or something like that, but it might be a way to have.
Is this on like a special spreadsheet or what is like?
It's an Excel spreadsheet,
Okay.
yeah, and so it's just an easy to navigate kind of, you could add a comment too, so. In
Okay.
progress, and you say pending funding or something like that, but.
So it's kind of like a living status update situation.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and then obviously it's a budget, so we look at it once a year and we update the status and the comment. But it might be a way to keep the same
I
structure.
like that idea because I mean, really, we could just every quarter, if the structure is already built for
Yeah.
updating.
Yeah,
Because it actually wasn't when we originally did it, but if the structure is already built for updating, we can
yeah,
monitor it more easily.
Well,
Yeah.
too, we could have like I was gonna use the word trigger, but there's the more appropriate word now, but like, cause once so many of the action steps are completed for one of those goals, then that sends this committee back in to look at that goal again,
Like if-
it'll,
If
Yeah.
80% are complete.
mhm. Right, something where it's,
Yeah.
because we might have, some significant progress on some of them, and then it'll be like, okay, now it's time to review.
And also helps with quarterly reviews as well.
Yeah,
Mhm.
if there's already a structure in place for how we're monitoring it, in progress, not started.
I'll grab an example
Okay.
of it or a template and I'll email it to maybe you 3, Heather, Megan and Veronica, if that's okay. We'll see if it
It
works.
feels to me like when the COC got audited by the state, they had like 15 recommendations for us.
Yeah,
And every 6 months, they'd be like, tell me, is this not started, in progress, or complete? It was like,
Yeah.
and
but if you can simplify it to just a drop down menu,
Yeah.
then it's
Yeah.
visually really easy to follow and update.
that's a good idea. We never
Yeah.
even put this in an Excel file, and I love
No.
Excel, right? Like,
Yeah.
but so it's like we can design the chart into Excel right from the beginning,
Yes.
so that we can keep it updated.
And then we can just link it literally
And we could link it literally on our website. It'd be kind of nice.
Right.
That would be great.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that idea. All right, so I'm not gonna set dates for future meetings because I really need to lock in the facilitator. We probably won't meet until we have a facilitator.
So next month, maybe not.
I don't think so. I'm gonna wait to have the facilitator and then stuff that.
Does anyone want to be involved in helping us identify and review contractors? Like, want to be, or you want to be involved in who we select?
Not really, but it really needs.
You guys care?
I don't care.
So, I mean, in order to be efficient, we will be trying to do this through a non-bidding process, and exception to bid is, I think it's $10,000.
Oh.
15. So we'll definitely, so we won't have
5-0,
to,
yeah.
what is it?
50, 50.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a little bit more freedom in how we select a facilitator, but just to put it out there, if Mari was interested, would it make sense or not be a good idea or?
Cannot.
Remind me why?
City council
Because she is an
Elected
elected
official?
official
Right.
that represents services that would be provided in her jurisdiction.
All right, all right, all right.
On RCOC
Okay.
conflict of interest.
All right. Okay, so if you have other ideas of kind of neutral, effective facilitators, let us know. I can't think of anybody right now. I have things on my mind. Lost track of the facilitator community.
Mhm.
And Heather, that means you can't be on any of our funding committees.
Okay, that's fine.
No, that's too bad.
That is too bad.
Okay, do we have any further comments before we adjourn?
Is there anything specific you want in a contractor? I'm just kind of thinking like, you want any guidelines or just pick somebody?
I think we give guidance on deliverables, so can
Yeah.
you these things?
Yeah.
Can you
I
do
just
it?
think
Can
we're
you
gonna
be
have a
objective?
million questions in our head.
We might reach out to some of you to get some feedback. I'm drawing a total blank right now.
Yeah.
So think about it another day.
Yes. Someone's killed and hurting cats. I'm down. Trying to get off on.
All right. Paul, do you have anything to add to it? You're good?
He's good.
Okay.
I'm good, thanks.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for making the link. I really appreciate it, and I will be there in person next time.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
People.
Sage, is that the same tiny little thing that you're working on about